Developing new prescription medicine for market is a costly and oftentimes a futile endeavor, as drug makers can spend up to $2.6 billion only to see 12% of their candidates gain approval. When Pfizer fails on 2 out of 3 new drugs, retail investors have grown leery of the space. But companies like Aequus Pharmaceuticals, AQS.V, have found a way to bypass this massive regulatory and financial bottleneck by seeking out existing drugs approved in other countries and bringing them to Canada for market approval. Spending 12 to 18 months rather than the standard 8 to 10 years for new drug approval, Aequus also benefits from low fixed costs that allow the company to profitably operate in a relatively small marketplace such as Canada, in niche areas, including neurology, ophthalmology, and transplant. Positioned for growth with $2 million cash in the till, Aequus is a steady bet in an uncertain industry. As such, EQUITY.GURU's own Chris Parry spoke with company CEO and chairman Doug Janzen to get a better look at the company's unique de-risked approach and its potential for investors.
Welcome to the EQUITY.GURU CEO interview. Today I'm talking to Doug Janzen from Aequus Pharma. AQS is the ticker symbol. How are you, man?
Doing well. How are you? Getting by?
Well, in this brave new political world. So for people who don't know what Aequus does, how would you describe that to them in 100 words or less?
Yeah, when you think about biotech, most people kind of, focus on companies that make novel discoveries, like the science-heavy companies, the 10-year, billion-dollar clinical development programs. We all come from that background, but with Aequus, we're a commercial business. So we focus on bringing commercial products to Canada and generating revenue from them. Canada is a large country by landmass, but a small market when it comes to global pharmaceuticals. And we've been able to carve a niche, out in the ophthalmology space in Canada and a few other areas, and have been adding revenues and products steadily over the past few years.
So, I guess a lot of people sort of steer clear of biotech and early stage pharma companies because of that long process of FDA approval and millions of dollars that are required to be spent, and the potential that, one small glitch sets you back a year. You're taking it in a very different way, in that you're going towards products that already have approval, just tweaking them in a manner that makes them a little bit more effective, maybe opens them up to a new market. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so I come from the original background of biotech development, and have gotten drugs approved, did billion-dollar deals around products with companies like Merck, and still lost my hair because of the stress of that business. It's even Pfizer fails on 2 out of 3 products in phase 3, and
right.
There's just not enough capital in Canada to really do novel discovery. It's difficult. There's only a few companies that are successful at that. So with Aequus, we look at products that are approved in the US or approved in Europe. So they're already on market, and we often bridge them into Canada. One of our major sources of those type of ideas is the clinicians in Canada that we service. If you're a ophthalmologist in Toronto, you're going to the same conferences as an ophthalmologist in LA or London or Berlin. Those groups of specialists traffic together. And we've often had Canadian doctors talk to us about products that have been approved in other territories, but they're not available in Canada. And we use them as our kind of sounding board when we do business development. We then bring those assets, we diligence them and start walking them through Health Canada, and then eventually, if all goes well, we get them into our salespeople's hands and we start generating revenue from them.
So I guess the timelines on that are a lot different.
Yeah, it's from the second you get a good idea and you start diligence on it, that usually takes 3 months. There's a regulatory process. You have to file with Health Canada. That can take up to 6 months. But you're measuring these things in kind of 12 to 18 months as opposed to 8 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. And your costs are pretty well fixed at what the filing fee is with Health Canada and whatever commercial deal you cut. Whereas, in the drug development world, if your trial doesn't meet a certain endpoint, you got to repeat it, or you have to expand it. Those things are $200 million decisions, anything that you're constantly making. So for us, because we're founders of Aequus, we are the biggest shareholders. as insiders, we really developed this kind of capital sensitive model because, for our own benefit. We saw an opportunity to make a profitable pharmaceutical business in Canada, generating decent revenues and not requiring huge amounts of necessary funding and financings and share issues to get there. So we we were greedy when we started it. We wanted to make a profitable business and do our best to pay ourselves well.
And your risk profile is lowered significantly as well. We're not dealing with we hope this will get approved. It's already approved. You're just basically changing, say, the format or
There's some of that. We'll reformulate existing products. Mostly we're looking at commercially approved products and bridging them into Health Canada. So they've already been approved in Europe or the US. So there's a dossier that a sophisticated westernized review has occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Then we start walking them through Health Canada. The main risk you have is execution on sales. How you've done your forecasting, is the opportunity as big as you thought?
Mm-hmm.
And then in Canada, it's just typical reimbursement. The pricing environment in Canada is difficult. It's just making sure your numbers are right, that supporting your business decisions. So instead of technical risk that you can't control, like I said, Pfizer, biggest company in pharmaceuticals, fails on clinical trials, constantly.
Mm-hmm.
None of us know what novel preclinical product is going to work or not. For us, most of the risks that we have, we can model, and we can, try to set conservative estimates and really be able to make, even though we're scientists, we want to make good business decisions, and that's kind of what drives our thinking.
Right. I guess the example I heard early on was if you're a parent of an epileptic and the drug treatment that you have to stop a kid from having seizures requires a suppository, that adapting that to a nasal spray might be opening up a market that's pretty significant that is previously untapped.
Yeah, there's lots of existing products that could benefit from reformulation. That's an area where we do less and less of that ourselves, but we're more than happy to go to experts who are developing reformulated products and license them for Canada. For us, most of our day-to-day efforts are around finding revenue-generating products for Canada and executing on the ones that we have. That's the major stuff.
That's not something that your average House Street guy can just decide he's making a pharmaceutical company and then start finding those partners themselves. There's a lot of knowledge and experience that has to be brought down to know who to deal with.
Well, we had kind of a few years where the average House Street guy thought they could make cannabis pharmaceutical companies, and a few were successful, but most weren't. It's a hard industry. We're really trying to focus on things where we can measure the risk, we can try to deal with it, and there's short timelines to revenue. That's kind of how we view the world.
Right. So the current products on the slate there for Aequus, you've had a couple of approvals over the last few months, which I guess bears out exactly what you're saying in terms of getting through the process. But news today about a third.
Yeah, we're expecting, we filed 3 products with Health Canada earlier in October. 2 of them have completed review and got approved, and we're expecting news on the third at any point. Launch initiatives have already started for all 3. We've been making inventory orders from our manufacturing partner in the UK, and we are really dialing up marketing efforts, the online presence for our online sales, and we're really looking for these to be material, contributors to revenue as we get into 2021. The one kind of neat trend in our space has been, drug delivery and how you sell pharmaceutical products really hasn't changed in the last 50 years. It still involves salespeople who get in their cars, drive all around Ontario, seeing physicians, dropping off donuts and samples at the front desk, and then they go on to the next one.
Right.
Well, COVID really affected that. Clinics were closed. doctors lost a whole bunch of revenue because they couldn't do procedures. The last thing they wanted was salespeople walking in their office and spreading COVID. It really changed it. And we shouldn't be surprised because online sales have revolutionized every other retail sector on the planet, but it was really slow in the pharmaceutical world. Now we're seeing kind of 30% of volumes, are now happening online. And as you can appreciate, it's way cheaper to have a server up and running than it is to have a fully salaried salesperson burning gas and car allowance, every day. So this doesn't just benefit Aequus, it kind of benefits that whole class of companies that we call specialty pharma. But the sales model is evolving more and more to a much cheaper and better margined approach, which is online. So we're really looking forward to that's going to be a big initiative for us as we get into 2021. We recently hired Grant Larson as our Chief Commercial Officer. Prior to that, Grant ran the largest ophthalmology purchasing consortium in Canada, and they did about $180 million a year in purchasing. So online, how you market to optometrists and ophthalmologists, all those things are what he did on the other side of the wall for the last 10 years. Now he's doing it, on our side as far as folks who are providing the products and generating revenue from them. So we're just super excited about some of the entrepreneurial things we can do as we get these products into market in Canada.
COVID's helped you along a little bit on the future sales front, but I note that you guys have steered very clear of the hype potential of what you do. You're not walking around saying we're going to come up with cannabis formulations. You're not, throwing out COVID-19 cures and psychedelics and all the things that potentially down the road there's probably an opportunity for. But you've stayed very much to, hey, look, we're a bunch of grown-ups here doing grown-up work. There's money to be made in the margins, and this is where we're at.
You've hit it exactly. Wall Street did not wake up today wondering where that next $6 million Canadian product is.
Right.
Pfizer certainly didn't. They probably spent $6 million on coffee already at this point of the day. For us, those, if we can generate $6 million in revenue off of our existing salespeople, the margins on that can be 80%. That's a good business. You cobble 4 or 5 of those together, you have a profitable business, and you can choose to either return capital or just keep adding to the mix. And eventually, the number one thing always in business is revenue. So we talk to lots of companies like us, bigger, smaller, and the idea around merging with someone or using investment capital to go build a bigger business. We look at all those things. So it's not as sexy as some of the other opportunities in biotech or what we talked about cannabis, but hey, it's our own money. We're really wanting it to grow.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said as well for not being the first guy to try and crash through the wall in a new area like psychedelics or cannabis, or even COVID for that matter. Certain companies in the Canadian exchange have rocketed on that front and then trailed off miserably. Yeah. You kind of want to be bringing in things that make money, not things that are going to cost you a lot of money to maybe have an opportunity down the road.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a scientist by training, and I got into finance. So I was an investment banker covering biotech for a long time. And when you're in that seat, you see way more failures than successes.
Yeah.
So you it really kind of focus on how do you avoid the risks, and less so than how do you generate the biggest reward, because that in our industry that's usually out of your control.
Yeah.
So it's how do you avoid the risks, and we don't think we're a boring story. We grow in revenues pretty well every quarter. Looks like we're gonna have another record quarter here in Q3, but it's it doesn't get the same sex appeal as some other sectors, but it's a good business, and we plan to keep growing it.
I think there's a lot to be said for no sex appeal. Speaking as a 50-year-old with could lose 15 pounds. We've all gone through the last few years of cannabis companies rocketing on promise and not necessarily on returns. That's certainly not the only sector in which that's been the case. But you guys are clearly looking at the older style of public company where you actually return a profit, maybe even think about a dividend at one point. It's like that I could put my money into a deal and 5 years later be comfortable that it's going to be progressed, as opposed to having to pull my money out every 6 months and put it into something else and pull it out and put it into something. Like, I kind of miss the old days where my parents had their stock certificates in a closet and a dividend check every month.
When you think about, Canada's seen these type of ideas before that we're doing. The Goodman family, with Knight Therapeutics and with Paladin, they built $1 billion business, one Canadian product at a time. We've Canada Medical Labs, John Mull, the same type of thing. Guys have built these really successful businesses, really lucrative, and we're kind of following that same approach. The market will respond to revenues, it'll respond to decreasing losses, it'll respond to new product launches, and with our partnership with Medicom, jointly we have rights for some of our products in the U.S. So, first thing is to really stabilize the current business, and then start looking, is there other opportunities, in much bigger markets. For example, our drug Titan for glaucoma competes head-to-head against Allergan, for patients. And Canada is about a $90 million market for the product, and we're getting about 6% market share. It's a $900 million market in the U.S. So, it takes infrastructure and it takes people, but if you can show that you compete and take 6% market share away from these, really big businesses, or approximately 6%, you can see where where there really are some sexy opportunities, as you look into Europe or the US and things like that.
And the more products you have, obviously, the better an economy of scale you have with your existing sales infrastructure and admin and general costs. Do you think people might be looking at your news flow right now and thinking, well, this is the dry eye company, and missing the fact that, next week you could have something that treats herpes or treats gallbladder?
I think we have a good presence in ophthalmology. We have good relationships with the clinicians in that space. For us, we are achieving economy of scale because we have multiple products that service their needs. Mm-hmm. There's some ideas out there that we look at that we might stand alone, take them forward, and try to build a sales force. But when we around different areas like neurology or something. But for us, the best, when we kind of rank products, ones that fill a need within the ophthalmology space are really front and center for us right now. One neat thing about ophthalmology in Canada, clinicians are really restricted on how they can generate revenue, and most of it's a not-for-profit setup in Canada. In ophthalmology, there's a few profitable companies that have been allowed. If you think about the laser vision correction, those are profitable businesses like any other business. They're motivated by profit. And a whole bunch of cool transactional type of deals you can do with those big groups that aggregate a lot of patients in a different way than would happen in a cancer setting or things like that. So there's a lot more flexibility around the business model in ophthalmology and optometry. And we love the transactional side of the business and finding win-win revenue solutions, and we're really excited about layering on deals with big buyer groups like the one that our CCO used to work for, and start getting into that space. It takes a single salesperson then to cover a whole bunch of people who aggregate in a buying group.
Gotcha.
And in some of these big surgical centers and the big optometry chains, they cross the border, north-south. So good relationships in Canada can lead to, executable opportunities in the U.S. as well. So I think
I hadn't really considered was the fact that in Canada, we're also very public medicine oriented.
Yeah.
So the number of potential customers that you have are a little bit limited in a lot of areas. Right. And what the government will spend is limited in a lot of areas. But in ophthalmology, it's much more of a private practice.
Especially optometry. Like optometry is pure private. Like those guys, they run retail stores. They have the same pressures and concerns that someone who has a shoe store. You know what I mean? Like they are businessmen and women who are, if you can bring them sources of revenue, make their days easier, it really works. Whereas in the medical side, it's all about, does the product work for the patients?
Right.
And that's as it should be. So we kind of bridge both of those sides. We do prescription glaucoma meds. It gives us a lot of street cred with the clinical group, and we really benefit from our relationships with clinicians as we launch all these dry eye products into optometry chains. It's a little bit of a different model. It allows us to get way more customer service oriented. It's not just about the data. It's about how we help our optometrists generate more revenue for their practices. How do we help them find more patients? How do we bring them products that are going to make differences to their customers and patients? And we're really excited about that.
So the products that you've brought so far, I noticed the moving an existing product that it was an eye gel for dry eyes into a format seems like an obvious thing for someone who has the rights to that product to make that change. Why is it that the originators of a lot of this IP get stuck into a less user-friendly format and don't do that work to progress it forward?
Yeah, it's usually what's the fastest to market, and then the next responders, because everything's competitive. People have to innovate to try to be better than what was first to market. I still remember to this day, it was I saw a well-known glaucoma specialist in Toronto. This was about 3 years ago, and she said, like, if you could give me a preservative-free single, like a multi-dose bottle, I would use that version in all my patients. So this was at a time where preservative-free eye care wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
The clinical community was starting to want to move that way. And Europe was kind of 2 years ahead of Canada. So we started to listen, like, this is how we do our business. We listened to the clinicians, and we went out and we found a company in the UK that makes a big line of preservative-free eye care products and delivers them in easy-to-use multi-dose bottles. That was Medicom, and we've taken that request by clinicians to find a product that has benefit over what's currently being used, and the benefit that may be modest at different times, but that's still how you market it. If you have a better product, that's how you market it.
Sure.
So that's a real specific example of Medicom has now grown to 5 products that we're partnered on. Some that are hitting market now, some that are going to get filed with Health Canada and the FDA, hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months. That's how we do our business. We listen to our customers, and then we try to bring products to Canada that we can market, that we can that have an angle that you can go present them to your customers and really try to explain why this is a better product.
So for them, they get to expand their product without having to set up another country's sales operation.
Yeah, they're really busy in the UK.
A lot of IP.
Yeah, like Medicom is, they have sales across Europe, and for a lot of companies, the revenues you can generate in Canada just aren't material to them.
Yeah.
It's or it's material, but it's not on the top of their priority list compared to what they can generate in the US, Europe, Asia. So
yeah.
We're happy to pick up the scraps behind these global giants, so to speak.
It's a good business model, this Aequus model. I think that I'm really kind of beat up over the last couple of years, both by the markets and the political world. It seems like that you try to pick a winner. You look at 100 companies in a day. They've all got big presentations that claim they're going to be billion-dollar companies or part of a billion-dollar market, or there's just a real lack of just grown-up opportunities. Just where if I give you my $10,000, I'm pretty sure that you're going to be a good steward of it. And I think that even if somebody, when Aequus came to market, looked and said, how do I know that these guys are any good? The news flow that you've had over the past 3 months has been one of legitimacy, of maintaining, look, this is what we said we're going to do. here it is, we've done exactly what we said we were going to do. Now here's what we're going to do next. And it's, I think, especially for new investors, that sort of being able to actually trust what's going on at the C-suite is almost a rare thing.
Yeah, it's, the small cap market in Canada kind of has evaporated in the last 8 years, and there was a lot of it drove into cannabis when that was exciting. You see some of it moving into gold, but in general, there used to be a huge amount of institutional small cap money managers in Canada. Mm-hmm. Now there's probably 2 or 3. So it's hard in that space from getting investor attention, but we're growing to this point where we can self-fund more and more of our projects. We can grow. We prefer to grow with a really strong market as our partner, but it's not as we're kind of gotten over the hump on that. We did a $3 million financing with Cormark in August. I was the biggest investor in that round, and we're getting to that spot where we think we can grow regardless of what our share price does, and over time that eventually value always gets recognized. Sometimes it takes long, sometimes it takes a little while. We're confident it'll get recognized.